Okay, hello. Welcome to a retake of a section of the Habitat demos for Friday, March 24th. Yours truly was doing the recording and probably didn't understand live streaming Google Hangouts well enough yet, so I think we got less of the screen share for the one of the demos. So that's what I'm going to re-demo for us all here. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to share this window and say that I am screen sharing, present to everyone, and now I can see it. Okay. I think this is what we want to see. All right. So what I'm going to re-demo for everybody here is a feature that we've been working on the Habitat team for probably a couple months. So a lot behind the scenes. This is in the supervisor to allow it to support more than one service to be supervised by the supervisor. So previously, up to this point with Habitat, you've had sort of one package that can be booted into one service that's managed by one supervisor. So this like one-to-one-to-one mapping of everything. And what we've found with talking with customers and users and taking questions that having one supervisor on a host VM node that's able to deal with more than one service is super beneficial for lots and lots of reasons. A big one even is the amount of network traffic that we're reducing for gossiping and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is do a slightly longer version of this, I think. So what I'm doing is starting up 3 Docker containers with basically just an image that just has the Habitat, the hab binary in it, and I'm installing the supervisor from our unstable channel, so from our acceptance environment, which has basically builds off master. So that's what this extra Habitat environment variable has in it. So that's pulling that down. And this is something that that any user could do on their system, by the way. Even if you have a stable version of hab, you can still do a hab install with the URL flag and point that at our acceptance environment and like get basically current builds off master. And what we're going to do is I'm going to create a couple files here. We call these service specs. And that's short for specification. So it's basically a way of describing a Habitat service that you want to boot. So formally, if you've used Habitat, you know that there's a bunch of flags we have on hab start here. So stuff like setting your group, setting update strategies, service group topologies, these kinds of things. So a lot of these flags, when we looked at it, are actually related to a Habitat service and not really the supervisor. The supervisor's interested in things like your gossip and listen ports, and your initial join peers, and whether you're a permanent peer or not, those kinds of things. So what we've done is kind of preserve the existing behavior so you can still start a kind of like one-off service with the supervisor, but also another mode that when you don't provide any arguments to hab start, you get a supervisor that starts with no services running. And how would you add a service into it? That's kind of where this notion of these service specs come from. So I've written these files out really quickly, and I'll just show you. We've got basically a new directory for that it shows up under the hab directory. So this soup directory is basically state that the supervisor needs, or data useful just to the supervisor. So not for a service like a Redis that has our hab SVC. Redis would have like service related data for Redis, but this is a place where we're starting to land more feature work, like the ability to restart a supervisor and have it come back with the same identifier and have, start to persist and cache its like gossip state, so that when it recovers, it can like load in a previous state. A few other things that kind of necessitated us to add a new directory. And one of these was a place to put these, what we're calling service spec files. So you can see they're laid out on disk like this. If I was to show you the contents of, let's say, this Redis one, it's a pretty simple, flat TOML file, key value pairs. The only required field or key value is the ident, so it would be the same thing if you said hab start. In previous behavior, you couldn't do anything without having a valid package identifier. So the same thing goes. If you just have an empty file, the supervisor is going to say, you don't have an identifier, so I can't load this thing. I don't know what you're talking about. By kind of supervisor preserved convention, you would call this file like the name part of a package identifier. So I'm going to start core Redis. Core is our origin, and Redis is our name. So that's why it's Redis, then .spec.toml, because it is toml, and it makes text editors happy when it knows the file extension already. So why not, overcomplicate things? And we have one more spec here, which is it is an inspec profile. So inspec is another project that Chef works on. It's one of our other open source projects used for compliance automation. So this is a profile that's basically doing checks against the system. In this case, it's a Docker container with a couple simple checks like, is there a service directory for hab? Is there a temp directory? I think were the checks. But this, we were able to bundle the inspec profile and the software so that it can run as a service. So basically, it's going to be firing inspec every few hundred seconds, and then so it's just in a little while loop with a wait, and then invoking inspec. So a nice simple way to do like composition and to start to bring these things in. Like in this case, this might be useful to run on every host or node if you're doing that kind of thing. So what we're going to do now is start up our supervisor on the top window here. So this is similar to before. There's a couple things going on here right now. I basically have to enable the feature flag in this version of the build to enable this functionality. So it's basically just an environment variable. You set it to true. We're working to actually remove that in master pretty shortly, so you won't have to do this very shortly. But if you're watching this later and you put that flag in, it's just a no op. It'll be ignored by the supervisor, and we'll just proceed on. And then the second variable here is some environment injected service-related config thing for the Redis service. We're just turning protected mode off so that the TCP ports can be bound and the Redis instances can kind of do their leader follower thing. So and we're going to start the supervisor up without any arguments, because we want like the default gossip and HTTP listen ports are fine, and we don't need to tell it about services because it's going to load those off disk. So let me full screen this, and we can just watch this load. So if I just pause this, scroll back here, you can see this is just the feature toggle coming on. And then, so it's picked up the Redis spec first. Looks like it's loading. Right now, these are happening in serial. At some point in the future, we may be able to do some concurrent downloading and loading. But for the moment, just to be safe, we're keeping it to just starting them in serial. But once the services are running with their child processes and handling all this stuff, that's happening, concurrently at the same time. So if I unzoom this here, you can see here's our supervisor that started up, added both of our services in, the inspec one as well. And you can see a couple interesting things happen now. So here we've got Redis that has started up, but it has been told to run in a leader follower topology. So it's just blocking and waiting on at least two other peers to come into the service group so they can do their leader election and proceed. But in the meantime, the inspec profile related service has booted. It has no such requirements, so it can just go ahead and start doing its thing. And you can see it's booted up. there's the inspect running, there's it coming back, and there's the like little shell script while loop doing its sleep. So it'll just keep doing its stuff in the background. And what I'm going to do is start up our other two. And you can see this one, it's the same invocation as the first one. The only thing I'm doing is adding a peer address, so the first one to join. So just like before, this is a supervisor related flag, right? Because it's the supervisor that needs to do the gossiping and stuff. So we can start that one up. You can see it's kind of like the same dance of firing things up. And then if I get the bottom one here kind of ready, it's just sort of fun to see these ones go up one at a time, because you can see the same thing is going on, that we've got our second Redis is still blocking, waiting on minimum quorum to start its election. And now let's let those proceed with loading the last one here. And once this happens, we should start to see some kind of Redis stuff fly by. There's our quorum, there's our leader election, there's our starting up. So what I'm going to do here is check out these Docker containers, and I'm going to attach to one. It doesn't really matter. And see, let's just get a guess for which one. Okay, this is one that has a peer flag on it, so it's either the middle one or the last one that I've joined. It doesn't really matter. All I wanted to show was where we're kind of going with this. So if I was to add another spec file, again, we've got this habsup on disk. You can see there's a bit more stuff going on here, that we're starting to do some more persisting stuff. This is work that Jimmy Winder's been working on. This is kind of some stuff related to the HTTP gateway as well. But you can see here's our spec directory. So what if I was to add another spec to like essentially hot add or hot load a new service into a running supervisor? So what I'm going to do is just that, and I'm going to write it out. I'm going to be slightly dangerous and just like write it raw into the right place, and we can maybe just start up Nginx maybe. So what should be going in here is the one-line TOML thing that says ident equals package identifier. What I'm going to do is what I did this morning is accidentally do this wrong. Just say I want core Nginx. So that's totally wrong because that's not TOML. That's just a one-line with a package identifier. But if I add this, let's see which one's going to pick up here. It's the middle one here. You can see this one line kind of flew by, which is the supervisor is monitoring the spec directory for any kind of file access or differences on disk. So it's determined that there is a new file, but when it tried to parse it in, it wasn't successful because it's like not valid TOML. So what's going to happen is it's just going to continue to keep trying to load that one, but it's going to ignore it if it can't kind of finish the job. So the hope is that somebody's probably going to notice this or fix their mistake, and then the supervisor hopefully now has something actionable it can work against. So if we were to go and edit this file, again, editing the raw file on disk is a little crazy, but like it's doable. Under the hood, if the supervisor is to do an equivalent of this, it's doing like writing to a temp file in an atomic move, so it's a little bit safer. So if we write and quit, you can see here's the middle one that's already like picked up the updated file event. It saw that it was valid TOML and kind of did its job and went off to the races, adding our Nginx service by downloading the stuff and then pulling it into the supervisor. And now we've basically loaded Nginx into a running supervisor in one of them. I could have also started something else up in another leader follower, and then you could do it for each, but you kind of get the idea. This idea of the hot loading after the supervisor started, it's still very, very early days for it. It seems to be, it's much more stable than it was 2 days ago. And there are still known issues if we were to delete one of these specs with a running supervisor. It is going to try and remove that service, but we have still to work through some stuff around the gossip and some metrics registering that we need to kind of unwind. So that is still a bit early. That's why we haven't pushed a release where this is the new default behavior, but we're very, very close on it. And I think that gets the idea across. Let's see if I can stop this screen share. I think this worked, and otherwise I have wasted yet more of your time, and I apologize, but otherwise we will see you next week. Thank you very much.